Hi, friends. This is the reading lesson for third grade. Today we are going to finish reading Thomas Edison, It Sings. So you need your booklets open to page 12 and you need a pencil and a highlighter. Before we get started reading the next part of our story, let's take a minute and read the main ideas that we wrote last time. So on page 12, you should have written, from an early age, Edison was curious about how things worked, which we know is going to make him a fantastic inventor. On page 13, we wrote that Edison didn't do well in school. Remember, the teacher thought something was wrong with him because he asked so many questions. So his mother taught him at home until the age of 12, and then he began to teach himself. Do you remember what his favorite subject was? Did you say electricity? All right, and then on page 14, he started to work to earn money. He was a telegraph operator, and he also worked on his own projects as he started working as the telegraph operator. Then on page 15, we know that Edison made his first invention, and, well, not his first invention, but an invention that that people actually wanted, right? And so using the money that he earned from selling that universal stock printer, Edison set up a lab and hired scientists to help him develop inventions. And that is where we left off. So go ahead and turn to page 16. We are going to read paragraphs 8 and 9, 10 and 11 and 12. And we're going to read all the way on the next page as well. And we're going to write 4 main ideas. So remember, as you are highlighting, you want to pay attention to the things that are helping us understand how and why Thomas Edison was such a great inventor. What attributed to him being so successful? Okay, let's go ahead and get started.
Great Inventions. In 1876, Edison attended the Centennial Exhibition World's Fair in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He displayed one of his automatic telegraph machines. It could send messages at high speeds. Edison also displayed an electric pen with a tiny motor. It was used to make copies of documents. This invention got a lot of attention at the exhibition and won awards for its innovative design. While at the fair, Edison was inspired by what he saw. His visit sparked many new ideas. Edison was especially curious about a device on display called a telephone. Invented by Alexander Graham Bell, this device transmitted the sound of the human voice over wires. In 1877, Edison worked on a way to improve Bell's telephone. He made it possible for voices to sound louder and clearer over the telephone wires. "I never pick up an item without thinking of how to improve it," Edison had said. He also made improvements on his telegraph machines.
All right, so we're going to stop there. So we know that in 1876, Edison attended the Centennial Exhibition World's Fair in Philadelphia. So that is where people kind of showed off what they had made, what they had come up with. So let's start by highlighting that part together, because that kind of is the setting of this next of these paragraphs, okay? Now, I want you to pause the video and highlight what you find to be important in paragraphs 8 and 9, and then we will check back together. So please pause the video and do that now. All right, so we know that Edison was at this Centennial exhibition, and he was displaying his automatic telegraph machine, one of them, right? And he also displayed an electric pen with a tiny motor. It was used to make copies of documents, so kind of like what we now have as a copy machine. So while he was at the fair, though, being who he is and being very curious, he saw lots of new ideas, right? And so he was always thinking, how can I make these ideas better, right? So he was particularly fascinated and curious with Alexander Graham Bell's invention of the telephone. All right, so now Edison's starting to think about the telephone, and he's probably thinking on how can he make it better. So in 1877, he worked on a way to make Bell's telephone better. And he was able to make it possible for voices to sound louder and clearer over telephone wires. Wow. And I like this quote that he says. He says, I never pick up an item without thinking of how to improve it, right? So this is kind of a lot of highlighting in this paragraph, but I think that's really important to who Edison was, right? He was so curious. We know that he was curious from the moments of when he was a little boy, right? So he's always just thinking, how can I make this better? What does our world need to be better? All right, let's go ahead and keep. Oh, actually, we're going to stop there and we are going to write a main idea for those two paragraphs. Okay, so grab your pencils. And so this is pretty much about the Centennial exhibition, what he saw there, and then what he did right after that. Okay, so we'll say the Centennial exhibition. What would you say? Inspired Edison because he saw all of these different inventions. And then what did he go to improve after the next year? The telephone, right? So we can say, and led him to improve Bell's telephone. All right, so now I'm super curious to see what happens next.
As a result of his experiments, Edison ended up with a new kind of sound machine. He invented the first phonograph. He found a way to record sound on a cylinder coated with tinfoil. The machine had one needle for recording sound. It also had a needle for playing back sounds. As sounds vibrated, the needle pressed into the cylinder in the same pattern. The first words Edison spoke into the machine were from the nursery rhyme, Mary Had a Little Lamb. The machine played his own words back to him. Edison knew this invention was important. He saw the many ways it could help people communicate. People could record letters on the cylinders instead of writing them down on paper. Books could be read onto the cylinders and then played back to blind people. Families could record and keep the sounds of their children's voices. Many of these ideas led to new tools for communication.
The phonograph was only one of Edison's many important inventions.
Okay, so you have to remember the time that this was happening, right? We think about recording and keeping sounds and listening to books on tape, and it's really not that big of a deal this right now, right? Because we have so much access. But back then, this was huge. This was a huge accomplishment, the phonograph, right? And it was able to record sound. So let's go ahead and do some highlighting, and then we're actually going to keep reading before we write our next main idea. So let's go ahead and start by highlighting he invented the first phonograph, okay? I'm going to stop there, and I want you to pause the video and highlight what you think is important in paragraphs 10, 11, and 12. Okay, so we should probably explain what the phonograph is, right? So it's a way, whoops. It was a way to record sound on a cylinder coated with tin foil. Okay. And it helped people communicate, right? So we know that we should probably highlight this. And remember, if you highlighted more than me, that's totally fine. I'm just kind of getting the basic, most key events. But everyone thinks that certain things are important, so you just highlight what you find is important. Because of the phonograph, people could record letters, books could be read, and then played back to blind people, and families could record and keep the sounds of their children's voices. Wow. All right, let's turn the page and then we'll write our main idea after we read 13 and 14.
Edison started a company that sold phonographs and cylinders. People bought cylinders with their favorite music on it. Later, wax discs, known as records, became the most used format. Edison's fame increased. In 1878, he was invited to the White House to demonstrate the phonograph to President Rutherford B. Hayes. Edison was nicknamed the Wizard of Menlo Park by a newspaper reporter.
All right, friends. So go ahead and highlight in paragraphs 13 and 14. And he was called the Wizard of Menlo Park because Menlo Park is where his laboratory was. Okay, so I just didn't want you to be confused by that. But go ahead, pause the video and highlight. Okay, so we know that he started a company that sold phonographs and cylinders, and people were able to buy these cylinders with their favorite music on it, which was later people started buying records, right? And we hardly even see records these days. Okay, and then in 1878, he was invited to the White House. I would say that's a pretty big accomplishment, wouldn't you? To demonstrate the phonograph. And if you remember from when we read about Alexander Graham Bell, President Hayes, when he got the telephone in the White House, he thought it was fine, but he didn't really see a need for it. Do you remember that? So, a little bit different. He invited Thomas Edison to the White House to see how this new invention worked. Okay, so let's put our caps on our highlighter and let's do a little main idea. So we're going to write our main idea right here. And so we know that that these last few paragraphs are about the phonograph, right? And it was one of his most important inventions because why? What did it change for people? Do you remember? If you're not quite sure, let's go back and look. It changed the way people communicated, right? Actually, I think we're going to write our main idea on this page because we have two more to write and I want to make sure we have enough space. So we can write one of Edison's most important inventions was the phonograph, which, and go ahead and finish writing that. What did it do? It changed what? Pause the video and finish writing that. Okay, it changed the way people communicated. Okay, friends, so now we're going to finish. Well, not quite finish. We're going to read paragraphs 15 and 16 and write another main idea and then paragraph 17.
Edison started a company that sold phonographs.
Whoops, what happened?
Even after so many inventions, Edison still brimmed with great ideas. For 2 years, he and the scientist in his lab worked hard on a new project. They wanted to develop a light bulb that used less electricity than other bulbs and could burn much longer. Edison's lab tested thousands of ideas and materials. In 1879, they produced a light bulb that glowed for more than 14 hours, longer than any other light bulb. Until that time, typical bulbs lasted only a few minutes.
A 7-foot poster introduced Edison's phonograph.
Edison eventually produced bulbs that could glow for over 1,500 hours. They looked very much like the light bulbs we see in our homes today.
All right, so again, we got to remember that this is way back and where they only had light bulbs that lasted for a few minutes until Thomas Edison came along, right? He eventually produced light bulbs that could last for 1,500 hours, 1,500 hours. That was incredible back then. So go ahead and highlight what you find to be important in paragraphs 15 and 16. Okay, so we know that he started working on new projects and that he wanted to develop a light bulb that used less electricity. So in 1879, they produced a light bulb that glowed for more than 14 hours. This is crazy. And I think it's also important to note that until that time, the typical light bulbs only lasted for a few minutes. And then eventually, he produced light bulbs that could glow for over 1,500 hours, and they looked much like the light bulbs that we see today. So, again, people are just trying to continue to make his invention better, right? Okay, so let's go ahead. We're going to write a main idea for those 2 paragraphs about the light bulb. So let's start by saying Edison found a way to make a light bulb that what? Used less electricity and could burn, whoops, longer than other light bulbs. Okay, so finish writing down that main idea, and then we have one more paragraph to read.
By the age of 83, Thomas Edison had obtained 1,093 patents for his inventions. His work improved the way in which we communicate every day. Edison died in 1931. By that time, most American homes had both electric lights and a phonograph machine.
All right, so we have one last paragraph that just tells us, kind of in summary, what Thomas Edison did. So we know that Thomas Edison, when he died at age 83, he had 1,093 patents for his inventions, right? So he had all those inventions that were protected that nobody could take credit for. And he always was working to improve the way that people communicated. Remember, that was a big thing for him. And by the time he died, he should have been really proud of himself, right? Most American homes had both electric lights and a phonograph machine. Can you imagine what he would think of what we have now? It's kind of crazy, right? So let's take a look at this orange chart. Well, actually, let's write our main idea for that last paragraph, and then we will look at the orange chart. So we know that Edison's inventions improved go ahead and finish this sentence. Improved, I'm going to put a line right here. It led to the use of the electric light bulb and the phonograph in most homes, right? So you are going to fill in that little blank right there. Edison's inventions improved what? If you're not sure, go back in page 17. You're going to read this main idea to me or to Mrs. Smith on Canvas. And then I want you to make sure that you write the whole main idea. So fill in that blank and then finish writing. Go ahead and pause the video and do that now. Okay, so now let's take a look at Edison's chart about his most popular inventions. Now remember, this does not have all of his inventions because he had over 1,000 patents for his inventions. So he invented the stock printer, which we learned about, which improved telegraph transmission of the stock market information. The incandescent light bulb, which gave us artificial light and lasted longer. The phonograph, which recorded and played back sound. The mimeograph, which made copies of documents. A storage battery, which helped recharge batteries. A a kinetoscope that was an early motion picture device for viewing moving pictures. So that was probably, pre the movie camera. The electric pen, which also made copies of documents. A movie camera, which was able to record films. Can you imagine a world if we didn't have that nowadays? A fruit preserver, which helped keep fruit fresh. And an electric train track turntable, which changes the direction of trains when they travel. Crazy. So many inventions. All right, don't forget to read me this last main idea on Canvas, and I will see you guys later. Great job today.